Let's talk about what sex addicts do when they're out there acting out or being sexual. So it's very typical of a sexual compulsive or a sexual addict to be using porn over and over and over again as a form of self-regulation, as a form of self-soothing, as a form of emotional escape, with or without masturbation. And I say that for a reason because, well, let me tell you a little bit of a story. I worked with a client once who came in to see me because he'd lost his job. And he lost his job because he was looking at porn in the workplace. And he knew the rules. He knew he wasn't supposed to look at porn in the workplace, but he did anyway, and he did enough to lose his job. And he started looking at porn in the workplace in the following manner. This man, I know this because he was my client, had had a violent and abusive alcoholic father. So he grew up with a very critical, very rigid, and sometimes violent dad. As you can imagine, in the workplace, he chose someone who was his boss, who was fairly gentle, fairly kind, and he really did well in that environment because this man does not react well to angry men. He still has all of that inside of him. But one day, and this is a true story, his boss, for whatever reason, was having a really bad day, whatever was going on in his life, and he turned to my client and he started screaming at him. Well, my client took that in, walked away, went into his office, closed the door, turned on some porn, and watched it for 4 hours. Never masturbated, never got an erection. Now you might think, what the heck was he doing? He knows he shouldn't be looking at the porn, and why? And if he's not going to pleasure himself, why is he even looking at it? And I can tell you that as a sex addict, what he is doing is he is using the porn as a means of emotional escape, psychological escape, self-soothing, and self-regulation. So after that boss yelled at him, it didn't matter one whit whether he was going to lose his job or whether his wife, nothing mattered to him except getting out of the emotional state he was in. And the fastest trip out of his fear, anxiety, and the trauma reactivity he was experiencing was to go look at porn. And so right into his office he went. 4 hours later, he lost his job. He didn't mean to lose his job. He really respected his boss. He really liked where he worked. He knew better than to be looking at the porn. But this is someone who had been using porn on a regular basis to make themselves feel better for a long time, just not at work. When the thing happened at work that he was unable to emotionally tolerate, he turned to the porn, but not even to the masturbation. Because for a sex addict, it's not about getting off, if you will. It's not about orgasm. It's about the process. It's a process addiction. It's about the looking, the searching, the hunting. Every image he looked at, every picture he clicked on, he's in more fantasy, more excitement, more distraction. And guess what he's not thinking about? His boss yelling at him, or how his dad treated him when he was younger, or the deep feeling of depression he now feels having been yelled at by his boss. All that is gone because he's singularly focused on the porn. And in those moments, nothing else matters. And that is how addiction looks for a sex addict. So sex addicts are anonymously hooking up. They're hooking up these days mostly on hookup apps. They meet people online. They go to adult bookstores. They go to strip clubs. They exchange sex for drugs or sex for money. You might call that prostitution. I know a lot of women, female sex addicts, when you pay them, they feel empowered. I know most of you ladies, if I had sex with you and then I paid you, empowered would not be the word that you would probably feel, but these women do, because they have flipped sexuality and their own sense of seduction into leaving them feeling powerful. So let me give you an example of that. I worked with a woman who was a stripper. She was a pole dancer. And she was in her early 30s, very beautiful woman. She had a 6-year-old daughter. And she came to see me because she no longer wanted to stand on a stage and strip. And the reason is because she had a daughter who was 6 years old, who was coming home from school and saying, "Mommy, you know, my friend Julie, her mom's a teacher. What do you do, Mom?" And she was increasingly fearful that her daughter would find out exactly what she did do for a living. And so she came to see me to stop, because she couldn't stop. And by the way, for people in the sex industry, it's very difficult to stop, not only because of the trauma that many of them have that drives the behavior, but because of the external rewards, financially and attention and all the rest of it, especially in someone who may or may not have a college degree or may not have a whole bunch of other skills. Being a sex worker pays fairly well, at least while you're young and pretty. In any case, this woman came to me because she wanted to stop her behavior. And I asked her what it felt like to stand on a stage in front of 200 men and strip. And she said, and she described how the men are hooting at her, they're yelling at her, they're throwing money at her. I asked her, what happened when she walked out to her car. Did she, at the end of the day, at the end of the evening, did she go alone? She'd say, no, I have to have a security guard take me to the car because there's guys out there and I have cash on me. And so I said, how do you feel when you're on the stage? And she said, I feel so powerful. I feel like I have every man in the palm of my hand, every guy in that audience. And I think, well, if I asked any of you ladies, just come on camera for a minute or two and strip. I'll put on some really good music and everyone who's watching this video will get to watch it. I don't think the words powerful and in control would come to mind for you. My guess would be for the average person, if you asked them to come and strip to music in front of hundreds of people, their response would be humiliated, embarrassed, uncomfortable, but she felt powerful. And when I asked this woman about her history, this is what she told me. This is a woman who grew up with an alcoholic mother, who married a man who molested her. And while her mother was passed out drunk half the time, her stepfather would come into her room when she was 13 or 14 and molest her all the way through her teenage years. Completely out of control situation for a young girl, especially when her mother was unavailable to help her. And what she did realize and what she did learn to do in that situation is fascinating to me. She told me that she figured out that even though it was an out of control situation, because she had a younger sister who was home and a mom who was passed out, and she didn't want her sister coming in and seeing what was happening, and she certainly didn't want her mom to find out, what she did was she found a way to control the man who was molesting her. She found that by putting on makeup, dressing with more cleavage, being more sexy, that she could control the time and the place that he molested her. She couldn't stop the behavior, but she could control the time and the place. So it gave her a sense of control as a child in an out-of-control situation. It makes perfect sense to me, I think as it should to you, that this is a woman who could stand on a stage 10 years later with her clothes off, and when men are showing her sexual attention, she feels powerful. She has found a way to defend against her injury by acting it out and getting rewarded for it with money and with power. And so I often run into women who will take drugs or sex and exchange them, who will take money for sex or drugs for sex and find that to be powerful or meaningful to them. Sex addicts go to prostitutes, they go to sensual or Thai or erotic massage parlors. And I gotta say something about that because when someone comes into me and they say, I don't see prostitutes, I go for sensual massages, that's called denial. And that's an opportunity for me to confront. Because what I'll say to someone is, listen, I guess I don't care what you call it, but let's try to be accurate. If you're lying on a table and someone rubs you all over with oil and you get an erection and they masturbate you to orgasm and then you pay them money, isn't that called prostitution? And by the way, if you go and see prostitutes 3 days a week, I will say to my client, it's fine with me, but let's not call it sensual massage. It just sounds so nice, like, oh, I had a bad weekend, I got a sensual massage. I told my wife she was happy for me. How about telling your wife you went to see 3 prostitutes this week and see how happy she is for you? And the point is that people have ways of dressing up things that they feel uncomfortable about with words that feel easier and more comfortable than the reality of what they are doing. And part of my job in intervening on them and challenging them on their thinking is saying, sensual massage is a nice way for saying that you see prostitutes 3 days a week. And for that man who doesn't want to look at it that way, he's going to think of himself differently if you use the right language for his behavior. Another way that I think about sex addicts, because they are constantly cruising, they're constantly objectifying, even though they may look like they're looking at you, they're really looking at the waitress's butt behind you, they're looking for that constant stimulation that is going to feed their sexual arousal and their fantasies. So they're kind of like sharks. Sharks, if they're not moving in the water, they're dead. They have to keep moving to get oxygen. Sex addicts are kind of like that. They move from sexual stimulus to flirtation to arousal to image because they're kind of skating across the top of that fantasy and that excitement, which helps keep them out of other feelings like depression, despair, mood disorders, anxiety, trauma, and issues that they don't know how to deal with or don't even know that they have. Sex addicts push boundaries. They view no as a challenge. They have multiple affairs. They engage in anonymous infidelities. They're sexting. They're abusing social networks, both for sex and for relationships. They're having virtual sex. Sex addicts repeatedly cross professional boundaries. So I frequently have seen doctors, lawyers, chiropractors, dentists, therapists, people in a position of power abuse that power to get someone to be sexual with them. And most of all, perhaps the most important thing about this is that a sex addict is living a double life. It would be very unusual for a sex addict to be coming home to family and kids or friends and family or whatever and saying, oh, I stopped off and I saw a prostitute today. What's for dinner? So generally what they're doing is they're engaging in a behavior that they are living completely separately from the rest of their life. Their life is compartmentalized. Their sexuality is over there, and friends, family, relationship, community, and work is over here, and the two never cross. So they really essentially are living a double life.